Okay, hey everyone, welcome to Treatment Trends. We appreciate you joining us. Today we've got myself, Jacob, and Kathy, and James is unfortunately out. He's got a birthday party that he needs to attend for family, but he will be back at the next episode. Today we are talking about, so your census is low, what are you gonna do about it? This question kind of makes me laugh, but we go in with a lot of clients, and I know Kathy and Jacob also have a strong perspective on this. The census is low and everyone's just kind of treading water or doing the same exact thing. So we wanted to look at that and actually give some suggestions on what you can do that might change things. So let's open it up from there. Kathy, Jacob, you guys want to start off? What do you see in terms of a census being low, and what are some things that people can do to start changing that are maybe different from what they were doing before?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll kick it off. So I think that there's a couple of things you have to do, and that's one is you have to stop and you have to look at what you're doing before you start doing anything else. I mean, we're not talking a long breath, but you need to take a breath and you need to say what's working and what's not working. I think sometimes what's happening is people are pedaling just as fast as they can, but they may not be getting anywhere, and so they think they should pedal harder. And really, it might be about taking a different approach. So that's my first recommendation is just stop for a second and take a look at what's happened. Take a look at the patients you've had before and what the patients are that you want to go forward with too. So that would be my first suggestion overall, because I don't think you can get anywhere by pedaling harder. The second thing is I would take a look at how far of a distance are your patients coming from. And then that's the area that you really want to focus your on the street marketers, as well as maybe some of your advertising, so that you can start getting more of a presence in one place, narrow your focus, instead of having such a broad focus. That would be the other thing I would say right off.
Amen. I'd agree. And obviously, Kathy and Nick are going to have some more or better ideas about the specific marketing tactics to use to fix that. For me, I guess it would come from more of a numbers or operations leadership nerdy point of view. And I think my first objective there would be to understand why is it low or down, right? So if it's low, that means that it was higher. So if in the past it's been higher and that's been consistent, what has happened? Have we graduated people and they've been successful? That's a great thing, but then is my alumni still engaged, or why is it not continuing to either stay at the same level or grow? Capacity issue, can we cut costs? That's a huge thing that I would pay attention to if that's what was going on. Are we wasting dollars on things that we don't need currently, or spending frivolously instead of against a budget that we've planned for and we can adjust based on the income? There's a lot of things to do there. And that's where I'd start, is understanding why is it happening? What can we do during this time? And how can we fix that? Not necessarily tomorrow, but operate from there on. So obviously, I think your quality of care that you're given is going to be the most important thing to increase that census. I know that's over time. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but that's the consistent thing that's going to fix it for you. It's probably where I'd start. There's some obviously creative ways to jump that census. I think Nick will probably get into most of that stuff, but for me, I'd be wondering why. I'd be fixing it, minimizing my costs, taking it from there, really understanding what I can do. There's also the point we talked about before. I think we talked about one episode with reputation and another one about something else where I had mentioned in all of them, hey, when you've got a free moment, deal with these things now. So sort of safeguard your business, start planning ahead, think of things that could go wrong, et cetera, while you're not busy. So if your census is down, you've got a few extra minutes and you got some extra time and capacity, that's really where I would do all that working on the business, not in the business, right? So I'd be checking everything I can, making sure that things are as efficient and well run as they can while I have some extra time.
Awesome. Right. Jacob, I think I want to come back to some of the specifics on there, but before we get too far, I agree with Kathy on the strategy piece. It's big. Most programs that we come into don't have a strategy, right? They're literally just jumping from tactic to tactic to, I mean, it's not even a strategy. It's just tactic to tactic every week, right? Or every month. This didn't work, let's try this. This didn't work, let's try this. But they're not putting a plan in place. They don't even have metrics built out about what would be reasonable in terms of final success, but not just the final success, which is obviously your census increasing back up, but what metrics are you watching to show that you're actually making progress towards that goal? Because admissions are not going to come in tomorrow, right? There's nothing you're going to do that you're bringing in tomorrow or next week. So how do you track your engagement rates, your response rates, your call volume, all these kind of secondary metrics that are really important to understand that, yes, we're actually making progress towards that goal. And then the second piece is the data. Just like Kathy said, where were your admissions coming from in the first place? Most people don't know. Kathy and I were just having this conversation where we were talking about AdWords, and I mean, I've seen it really consistently with the clients that we work with as well as across the board. I've never seen anyone really bring in more than like 10, sometimes 15% of their census from AdWords, yet everyone seems to assume that they were getting a bunch of admissions from it. And then when we go and we look at the data and we look at the tracking because it wasn't installed before, so we actually look at the numbers, and it's like, well, actually, no, you had a very small percentage of your admissions coming from AdWords. The phone might have been ringing a lot because you get a whole ton of like Medicaid calls, right? So maybe you felt busy, but you weren't actually busier at the end of the day in terms of generating revenue and having patients that you could help come into your business. So I think that's really important. Like I said, where are they coming from locally? Don't just go chase the policies, but find out, geographically where they are. Find out what channels were working for you. If AdWords actually never worked for you, where were those patients coming from? And then once you figure that out, you can invest a little bit more in those marketing channels. And then again, being strategic about it in terms of how are those marketing channels interplaying with each other. So a lot of centers are just very single-minded in the sense that it's like, well, I'm just looking at AdWords, what's my cost per admin for AdWords? I'm looking at my TV spend, I'm looking at my call buys, what is my cost per admin for these channels? And those are not going to give you a clear picture. You want to look at your overall call lift. You want to look at your overall admissions lift. Just understand that, yes, people might see you on a Facebook campaign, for example, research you online, and then maybe they'll see your TV ad and remember to call up that number, right? But there's this decision-making sequence that happens that you're not going to be able to give a final attribution to. And that's something that most centers haven't really understood well, and they haven't built out the tracking to watch that journey so they can understand all the different touch points that are occurring. So I think that's really important. Kathy, do you want to kind of elaborate on any of that?
Yeah, there's a couple of areas that just kept popping on my mind while you were talking. So one of them is that all the work that's being done in whether it's in blogs or whether it's your website or whether it's anything that's happening should all be saying the exact same message as your business development people are saying. So you're going to assume they're saying that, right? You're going to assume your outreach people know exactly what you're talking about. But remember, they're actually out of the building more. They're out doing things. So there's a very good chance they're relying on the same stories they've relied on forever. So I want to caution you to not change anything without giving that direction to your business development team so they can take it forth as well. So that same message is consistent across the board, which is kind of marketing 101, but it's really easy to get out of that when you work in the kind of environments that we're working in now. And there's so many risk factors of everyone making changes on a frequent basis. But the other thing, I got to expand a little bit more on this whole outreach and business development and what they're currently doing. So I do think people are working really hard. In the past, we've done a lot of conference attending and large dinners or large events, and where that's a great way to get your name known, and I appreciate that need. But if your name is known and you've been able to run a business for a while, I think you have to take that to the next level. And you have to walk away from doing so many large group events. You have to remember this is a people business and get back to just talking with people about the changes that are occurring within your organization. So if it's talking about it on the website and you're talking face to face with me, it's really important that you're doing that. They're doing that follow-up. And I think it's important to check in with your referral sources has their business changed? Because all of our business models have changed. So if you're not asking that question about, like, how have you adjusted your business? What kind of patients are you seeing that we both can still mutually help? You're making a big miss by just assuming that it's only about relationships, because there's got to be value for each of you as a business on top of that relationship that you may currently have.
Yeah, I want to jump on something there, and then I know, Jacob, you'll have comments on this, but, when I look at a training center or a program, I'm looking at the assets from a marketing channel standpoint, right? And I want to know, is your marketing channel bringing in regular admissions, right? Or is your marketing interplaying in a way to do so? And so to Kathy's point, a relationship is an asset to my program, is an asset to my business. So let's say that my program has a really strong relationship with Hazelden, right? There are good programs out there that have strong relationships with Hazelden. And I see historically that, we're getting a couple admissions a month from Hazelden. Well, that's very valuable to me. And even if I'm looking at someone that's coming in to purchase my business, I'll say, okay, well, I can rely on this asset, this relationship that's been built up to bring in a couple admissions every month. Same thing with, AdWords maybe, but when you look like Facebook or TV or radio that are branded channels, it's the same thing. It's an asset to the business, right? Because I know I've built up my name and recognition with that. The problem that a lot of people get into, especially recently, is the call buy end of things. And this is a soapbox of mine, but there's no branded asset there, right? I bought calls. I don't know who's generating those calls. I don't know where they're coming from. They probably don't even know the name of my business, right? They just came to some random landing page, called the number. I won the lottery on that call, and it got transferred to my center. So because it's not an asset in your business, I don't care about it from a buyer perspective. I don't care about it as a marketing or an operational consultancy perspective, because it's not adding value to your business. You're dependent on this third party that could disappear tomorrow, right? They could double the cost that they charge you tomorrow. You don't own that media, right? You don't own that asset. So you've got no recourse there, right? So it's not valuable to me. So I think that's a lot of the problem that I see with centers is they're investing in these assets that they don't own. And so they're not actually building up long-term value in the business. Jacob, do you see that on the buy-sell side?
For sure. I mean, I'd agree 110%. There's definitely a lot more value to you building the brand and people knowing you. That's why they want to come to you for whatever reason it might be. Maybe you've got some perk or benefit, or maybe it's quality care, maybe it's 100 different things, but whatever it is, you built a brand around it, and that's why they want to come. It's not because, like you're saying, they called some 800 number, you won the lottery, and they come to you randomly. But there's most definitely a premium paid by those looking for businesses for something that's a little longer running, established brand name that has all those relationships built. So they know that the referral sources are going to be pretty steady regardless of who's running it. Obviously, as long as they're still doing things correctly. But I mean, regardless of the person in charge, the business is still known and people still know to send patients there because they're going to get the same quality of care, the same brand, the same process as they always have. You're definitely on target about that. And it's a big difference in premium as well, usually. They may put a little bonus on you doing that or having that set up. Whereas if you don't, and they feel like the marketing is just something that you're scrambling to make happen every month, or I have to spend a ton of money in order to get this money to come in, it's more than a discount they'll place on it. Lots of people will walk away from it and not be interested.
I'll comment on that because I see it really consistently. We actually get approached by treatment centers, and they'll come at us and say, hey, we're looking to sell. And they're usually a little distressed by this point anyway. But they're saying, we're looking to sell, and we just need you to generate as many calls as possible. And their whole game plan is, well, we're just going to show them that we have this really high call volume, and so we're a successful business. I mean, buyers are not that stupid, right? Yeah. Private equity firms are not that stupid. They're going to look at that channel. They're going to look at how sustainable it is. They're going to look and see if it's actually generating admissions that are branded. And again, we've seen them walk away from it consistently, just like you said. So, it's not a smart strategy.
Nope.
No.
That's a Band-Aid. That's not curing the real issue that's causing those things.
Exactly.
Just to add on to that too, is the idea that when you said a Band-Aid, it's like, you're also not doing short stop measures just to get patients. Is not really a successful way to go about doing it. There needs to be a long view with a lot of mini sprints in between, and all those sprints should take you to that long view. So the idea that I see a lot of facilities just throwing ideas that trying to get patient acquisition and changing it every day, that's not an effective strategy, and that will not help you get patients even necessarily short term, really. May get you a few that day or a few that month, but truthfully, it's not getting you what you need. And that's a consistent, sustainable, model that you can get patients through.
And that'll still not be you still won't be very profitable, right? So that's still going to cost you a ton of money, and that money won't come in revenue until way later. So lots of times when I see buyers looking at business, even if the business is half full or even less in their census, if there's still enough margin that place is profitable and they run the business efficiently, then that just looks like that much more room of capacity and growth that this person can take advantage of. A new owner can.
Yeah.
Right. But if the thing's at 50% or less full just because of poor management or poor clinical care, et cetera, then it's a whole different story. Or if you've gotten it full from there, but it costs you an arm and a leg in order to do so, it's still not attractive. So, having the right margin and making sure your costs are under control and running a business efficiently to a strict budget is going to be even more valuable in a day when your census is not at 100%.
Yeah, and something to add in there is this idea of the key man risk, right? I've seen it especially with smaller programs, but also some programs that have just been around a long time. The owner of the business, or maybe the CEO, has been in it for 30 to 40 years, or they've been involved in the recovery community for 8 to 10 years in their area, and they're generating the majority of the admissions. Well, again, from a sustainability standpoint or a growth standpoint, I can't scale myself, right? I'm getting a certain amount of referrals, and that's what I'm going to get. But two, let's say that I walked away and I sold the business, right? Well, all those admissions are going to go away with me because you haven't built up sustainable marketing channels, or you haven't built up a brand around your program, you built it around reputations of your own. So that becomes highly problematic as well, and there's a lot of risk to that. And so programs are not going to, people aren't going to want to buy a program like that. And then you have to look at it on your own and say, hey, do I really have a business here, or do I just have a large number of personal relationships that are creating a lifestyle business?
Yeah.
And maybe I'm happy with that, maybe I'm not.
Every business is going to be much more valuable if someone else off the street, wherever, can come in and start running it day one. So it's not dependent on you. That's every business in every industry for the most part. But definitely this one. I've got one that's a client now that he's built a fantastic relationship with first responders and so forth. Well, if someone else comes in and buys that thing, and he's all the relationships, like they like him, they don't really know the brand of his treatment center necessarily. They just like him. Well, then that's not so valuable to a new buyer. They're not paying premium for that yet until your company is proven that we cater to these people. We do this, and this that they love. That's why they're going to continue coming to us, not looking at us just because this guy has a great relationship with them.
Yeah, exactly. And so your clinical program is also an asset in that sense, when it comes down to that quality care, right? Because again, your chief medical officer might switch out. Some of your counselors are going to switch out. So a big piece of the value is the culture you've built, how interchangeable it is from a human talent perspective. And obviously, part of that too is if I can keep talent long term, that's also an asset, right? So like, okay, they built a culture where people want to stay for 20 years. And so I can assume if I come in today and purchase this treatment center, that CMO is going to be there another 5-10 years. That's really valuable to me, where if I see them flipping over every year, I'm like, well, I don't really have anything here.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
So let's get to some specifics, right? So I think we're talking generally here. Let's start with Jacob. Can you talk a little bit about some of these cost-saving measures? So, we were talking before we got on, like we were looking at a 6-bed detox with $800,000 or $860,000 in labor cost, which is just huge for a 6-bed detox.
Yep. I got another client that I just came across recently where a guy was hired to come in to fix the financial stuff, and all he was doing was cutting costs for, 3 months, 6 months. He just now got him back to the black to break it even. This happens all over the place, and it's because when you're flush, you're flush, and when you're out, right? Like that's how everyone feels. So when you have money, you're spending crazy, and it's nice, it feels good, but you're not being responsible for those future times that you don't know what's going to happen. It's the same as saving in your piggy bank, right? You don't know what's going to happen in the future, so let's be prepared for it and take some safety measures. But yes, some of the costs, obviously labor costs, like you were just mentioning, I see out of control all the time. Nothing wrong with taking care of your employees and paying them the best that you can and making it a great place to work. However, if you're consistently, census is falling or something's going on that you've got a big difference in revenue, I'm sorry to say it, those people aren't going to be affordable or not at that rate or not as much time. So you've got to figure out something to do. I would still make the labor cost probably my last cut, especially when there's a lot of frivolous things out there. However, everything has to be on the board if you want to be prepared or capable of making it through a downtime. I wouldn't want to get rid of people or positions or anything like that first at all. There's a lot of things out there that are more crazy costs that I see going on all the time. And those things can be curtailed very quickly if people are willing to understand the future goal and the point of the business, what we're trying to achieve here. You can say all the things you want about how it's run or whether or not it's efficient or what we're spending money on, but the bottom line is if you go out of business, it doesn't matter how well you were taking care of the patients because you're not going to be able to anymore. So if you want that patient to be taken care of, you have to be financially responsible.
Yeah, exactly. I think other things I've seen are just like super high cost for like medications. They're going to like a local pharmacy and paying $100 a pill where they could do a group buy for like 25, right?
Do a whole thing, yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. Labor cost is huge. Sometimes just the lease of the building that they have has been climbing like significantly for a long time. It's gotten out of control. They didn't have good contracts in place. What else have I seen from obviously the marketing spend, right? I mean, like we'll go in and like, oh, spending $500,000 a month on marketing, but you're actually only getting, a cost per admit of like $15,000. That's horrible. Like, stop doing that.
I'd add in that on the marketing component. I would take a look at all the sponsorships people have been doing over the years to get your name out there, and conferences you're been attending. And just because you've always done that, that right there is the first thing I would completely get rid of financially. I mean, it's 2,000 here, 2,000 there, 2,500 there, but that adds up really quickly. And I'm not sure that's what's getting your name out there. So like it's maybe stopping and pulling back from some of that stuff. And then what are you paying for your print material and the swag stuff that you're printing, and where, the different tchotchkes, like how are you using those impactfully? Or we just said it because that's like, I have yet to go to a company in my life now that hasn't like gotten so much swag, so much tchotchkes, because it's so cool, right? But I'm not sure being cool is the perfect reason to spend money on giveaways that most people are not even going to keep. So like seriously, look at those things and put the money in a different place on the relationships and on the investments of how we connect with people. And maybe just not spend some of it.
That's true. Definitely not at that time. Those perks and those frills are definitely the first thing that should be cut. I mean, those are all over the place. And you see them, people are used to things going this way. Well, yeah, I was used to it when we were making X amount of dollars based on X capacity. But if we're not there, right, I can't keep spending things that aren't really getting a return for us.
Yeah. Well, frankly, I mean, the conferences we go to, they're always at these swanky hotels that are like $350 a night, and like, are you
right?
I mean, whatever. That's not me. I'm not going to pay $350 a night for 4 days.
Right.
Bro, for a room that I'm just going to sleep in from like 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. That's your point. So let's look at, Kathy, let's look at a couple of different like marketing channels or marketing aspects, different areas that people can improve.
Okay, so let's start with some of the really basic things, and I would say everyone could probably improve their social media components, especially just in beginning with educating the people who are posting on your sites. So you may have some professionals that are posting on your sites, but more likely, my experience has been business development. And so I'm going to give you a really practical tip in my mind. So if it's someone marketing business development, it's one of your facility folks, and they meet up with another person from another treatment center, or they meet up with some other referral source. And so they're snapping a picture of the two of you smiling, and it's on, put on LinkedIn, but it's not put on LinkedIn with any context. Like, so if Nick and I were at the same event, when we post something, we're going to say, hey, this is a great partnership, because what we're doing is we're looking at how to make recovery more accessible to people, because that's what marketing is about, is us opening that doors and making it easier for people to get in. So, I mean, just using those little things a little bit more effectively, and instead of just being something that people would ignore after a while that they saw from you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I would say, that's the consistency component is often missing from a lot of programs. Like I said, they're flailing around, spending money here, spending time there, they never stay consistent. And so, like when we go in, so we do a lot of operational pieces, right? Where we go into a program and we look at the numbers And that, I think, is a starting point for any program. If I see that your business development team is consistently only bringing in 2 or 3 admissions per rep, well, that's a huge starting point, right? So I have this team that I'm paying for, right? Paying these salaries. Let's figure out how to get them up to 8 to 10 admissions where they should be at. That's our first step, right? And we know that we're going to get a good ROI on that. We know that that's a good investment for everybody. And then from there, okay, let's look at the AdWords spend. All right, it's really high. Cost per admin is high. Do we bring that down? How do we optimize those campaigns? Okay, you're not running Facebook. You're not running TV. Well, how do we do that in a way that makes sense? Have you run some campaigns in the past we can use for historical data? What can we use and benchmark against, other clients or people in the industry that we know are using? And then understanding what their budget concerns are, because we want some of that short term, right? If your census is low, we need to figure out a way to pump things up a little bit without being too much. But then at the same time, how do we also put in the long-term strategies of integrating these campaigns, of making sure the tracking is in place so that we do know our numbers going forward, and investing in long-term things like SEO, right? It could take me 6 months, but at least I'm going to have this asset in my business that's very cost effective, once it's up and running. But you have to look at all those numbers, right? And so I think that's a starting point for a lot of people, and understand there's no plug and play, there's no one size fits all, but what do your numbers say? Where can you invest now that's going to get you what seems to be a conceivable return, especially if you look at your historicals. I see that my business development team used to be generating 7 to 8 admissions a month, and now they're at 2 or 3. Well, why? And let's not do the same thing that we were doing before. It doesn't mean that what we were doing before that worked is going to work again. It's not, because they're probably doing the same thing. So how do we change it up? And I think that's important to understand that there's got to be a piece of change. A lot of owners are very uncomfortable trying to do the same things over and over again. But you've got to change what you're doing.
Some of the most innovative things you can do have nothing to do with something you build or technology. Some of the most innovative things you do are just taking something from a different approach. And we talk a lot, the three of us and James, about being disruptors in the industry in a positive way, right? Just doing something like we're doing now, or finding their voices in some other way, I think is really important. I challenge my business development people especially, but also my CEOs at the facilities and things like that, to say, how are you sharing your voice that will help someone either break the stigma, get into treatment easier? It has nothing to do with like direct marketing for admissions. It literally has to do with our reputation and you having a voice, because we're all in this business for a reason. And it can be, for some of us it's social media, for some people it's articles, but also like, be on TV answering questions about addiction for someone in one of those little mini sessions after the news, or go ahead and go to a council meeting to help with those kind of things. Just find different ways to be a voice in the industry. And you may not see a direct, ooh, I got a patient here, but you are going to see a response to that, and that will continue to build as well.
Yeah, we had clients with like the PR component. We had like a senator come to one of our clients' locations and interview the team. They took pictures. They got in the local newspaper, and that was huge for them. They actually did get quite a lot of phone calls once that article was published. But also it opened that door for a lot of partnerships in the community, right? All of a sudden they were like, oh, these people are serious. The senator is paying attention to them. They must be a really good operator. They must be doing the right thing in their community. So suddenly it was easier for their business development team to go and talk to people, and so I think it's understanding like how those components work together.
Yeah.
Agreed. And I think those things that you do from the heart, like you're mentioning, Kathy, actually have the biggest ROI over time. So you don't really maybe see it up front initially through dollars, but I think showing your heart and that you care and what your real purpose and mission is what's going to turn that around for you in the long term, if you can make it there, if you can get through the tough times in the meantime. But there's plenty of ways. Definitely the relationships you're building, figuring out where the most referrals are coming from in your town and building that relationship, or knowing your own data very well. So where are ours coming from and how can we get more of them and continue to spend 80% of our time and money there? Or where's the gap that we're not touching that we should be and we can go pursue? I think all those are valid questions to study and take more time on your business while you've got some more time because your census is down. Look at it as an opportunity. of course, be more efficient with the cost, as we were saying.
Yeah, I think this keeps kind of coming back to this brand reputation idea that we always talk about, right? But if you are 100% focused on AdWords or call buys, or even if you're running unbranded TV campaigns, you're not building up anything long term, right? You're just spending money, and again, no one knows who you are. They're just randomly calling in.
Mm-hmm.
So being really smart and really intentional about where you're consistent and where you're reaching out to people in a way that they are going to start to know who you are, which opens the door for people to feel more comfortable calling you, right? Which means that more people are likely to admit from the phone calls, which means your business development team is going to have an easier time getting in the door. All these different factors that I think I'd say the majority of programs have largely ignored. And there's huge opportunity there. And the best programs that we work with are the ones that have stellar reputations in their communities or with specific demographics like EMTs or firefighters. They've got those relationships that everyone trusts, and so they don't have to struggle to get people to call them. They don't have to struggle to get people to admit. Like, people already have a certain level of trust before they even pick up the phone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really briefly, let's touch on a couple of innovations. We were just talking about different things that people maybe haven't thought about or looked at within the treatment space. So Kathy, I know you had a couple ideas in particular.
So I'm a really big fan on using different kinds of applications to make things more successful, and kind of giving Care for props. But the idea of using a tool for your alumni to be able to stay connected to your facility is also going to give you more opportunity to get referrals back from your alumni, because they're really still engaged and connected, all the while doing a super good thing, and that's keeping people engaged as they go through their life of recovery. So it's a win-win to me to use a tool like an alumni application. But there's other applications as well. Ones that could be connections for the families. So just the idea that we use technology in a different way to be able to connect with people, because there's a large percentage that are using it. Around 70% of most calls for treatment come from a mobile device, right? So how are we using our technology to work with a mobile device is always, I think, an important question.
Yeah, I'd agree wholeheartedly. I think the alumni thing is the most important to me. I think that's the best way for you to really, it's a testimonial, right? You're showing what you've done well from the horse's mouth. I think it's a great idea, and it needs to be spoken to or focused on much. Apps, I think communication is the most important with all parties, like you're saying, the family, everyone involved, more of an integrated care or approach to the patient. There's plenty of technology companies out there that I'm dealing with, quite a few that are all trying to get into that space. I don't know if anyone has it all the way right yet, but a lot of them are very, very interesting, and all covering different aspects of the treatment cycle. But I do think that's probably the next opportunity, the next phase. We already see everything happening with telehealth and so forth. That I think you're not very far off from somebody disrupting a lot of this industry that we're used to, the way that it runs, with some technology that's going to help kind of break the stigma. So more people are going to actually address the issue because it'll be an easier way of use. And then the treatment will actually be a little bit easier as well, if you're always able to be in contact with either other people in your same situation or therapist patient back and forth all the time. I agree. I think that's the next step. It's not too far away.
For sure. I think sometimes we end up talking a lot about the business aspect of things on the show, because I think that's what the three of us tend to be focused on. But you notice in everything that we're talking about, everything that we mentioned, it all does come back to the clinical component. And the better your clinical care is, or the better you can do clinical care, the better you'll be able to increase the business. So if we look at the alumni app, for example, we know that the longer people stay connected to treatment, the more successful they are. So that's driving clinical outcomes, right? And that comes back to us in the form of, from a business aspect, in the form of referrals, increased patient engagement, et cetera. Same thing if we're using an app. We would go into programs that don't even have a CRM, right? And the amount of time that they're wasting just trying to figure out who's got what on which Excel sheet, it's unbelievable. Imagine if we took, that 20 hours a week across, team members that are spent on messing with Excel sheets and just put it into a CRM you could be spending time and money on increasing your clinical care, right? Same thing with the marketing angle. When we talk about branding and reputation, when you are not running unbranded campaigns, when you're sending people to your actual website, when they know who they're calling, I mean, you're building trust. People feel more confident with the clinical care that they're receiving or about to receive because they know who they're talking to, they know who to reach back out to. So all of these things ultimately connect to the quality of the clinical care and the clinical experience coming from your program, and that will ultimately lead to these revenue drivers. So it's one and the same, and I think people need to keep that in mind. Whenever I look at something, it's like, how is this going to improve the clinical outcomes of the program, right? And if it does, it's probably going to improve the revenue of that program as well.
Agreed.
Well, any final thoughts before we sign off for this edition of Treatment Trends?
So I just need to give a shout out to, I've changed my role. I'm with Promises Behavioral Health, and I'm the Senior VP over marketing with them, which is a great opportunity for me to be working with a growing organization like this. And we're doing some pretty exciting things with treatment. So I'm very excited to be a part of that. I want to share that with y'all.
Congratulations. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Congrats. And you're working with a very cool team over there, right?
Oh my gosh. The best. The best. Yeah.
Very exciting. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us next time on Treatment Trends. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.